They rented a beach house in Maple Shore. Big place. White shutters, private boardwalk, chef with his apron monogrammed JP. I only knew that because someone posted a group shot on Instagram. I zoomed in. Dad was holding a glass of something red, probably the same Merlot he's been drinking since 2004. Mom had on her pearls, and Aubrey in the middle, blowing out 30 candles like she was being inaugurated. Nobody told me about the party. I didn't see a group text, no invite, nothing. I'd been back stateside for 3 weeks. 3. I'd bled through a sock on day 1 and iced my ankle with a bag of frozen peas from a gas station mini-mart. Still hadn't unpacked. I drove down anyway. 6 hours from my apartment in Denton. I didn't pack a bag. Just wore my old field jacket and boots that still had dirt from Djibouti crusted in the soles. I wasn't planning to crash the party. I just wanted to see if I was crazy. Turns out I wasn't. The guard at the front gate didn't recognize me. The early 20s. Buzz cut that said part-time gym, full-time vape. He checked the guest list twice and said, "Sorry, ma'am. You're not on here." He said ma'am like it was a threat. I showed him my ID anyway. He didn't care. "You can call someone," I said. "I'm just the gate guy," he said, like he'd already clocked out. I stepped back. Through the iron fence, I saw the edge of the pool, a chef flipping something fancy, and Dad laughing with 2 other retired officers I hadn't seen since high school graduation. My high school graduation. Not Aubrey's. She had a destination ceremony in Aspen. No one called me for that either. There was a moment, I swear, when my mom turned toward the gate. I raised a hand. She didn't wave back, just adjusted her sunglasses and went back inside like nothing blinked. So I left. Do you ever have a moment where your name isn't just forgotten, it's erased? That was it. No shouting, no scene, no drama. Just absence. No one noticed I was gone because no one knew I was there. Here's the thing. Leave a comment if you've ever shown up at your family's event and been told you don't exist. I'm serious. Comment something, even just a dot. It's cheaper than therapy. And while you're at it, hit subscribe. I'm not done. I drove for 20 miles before realizing I hadn't put on music. The silence felt like company, the kind you don't like but let ride along because it doesn't ask questions. My phone buzzed once. Group text. "Happy birthday, Aubrey," with 10 heart emojis and a blurry cake photo. I scrolled. Every family member was tagged, except me. They used to say I was the quiet one. It turns out that I was the only one they could live without. I didn't turn around, didn't call, didn't ask why. I just kept driving. Under my boot, the gravel cracked like it had something to say, but I didn't stop walking. The next gas station had a working coffee machine and a bathroom with a mirror that looked like it had survived a bar fight. I splashed water on my face. My reflection didn't flinch. I looked like someone who couldn't decide between disappearing and doing something reckless. Back at the apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped the keys on the counter and opened the closet where I kept the stuff I never really unpacked. Field gear, medical kit, 1 burner phone I hadn't thrown out yet, and a box labeled Denton, Storage, Do Not Touch. Inside was a laminated copy of my first deployment orders, a bronze coin I got for pulling a bleeding sergeant out of a blown truck, and a photo I didn't remember printing. It was from a family dinner, probably in 2013. Aubrey's hair was curled, her teeth white enough for a toothpaste ad. Dad's arm was around her shoulder. Mom was laughing. I was in the background, mid-blink, reaching for the potatoes. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. I couldn't decide if I was always invisible or if they just got better at pretending I wasn't there. They used to say I was too mission-focused. That's code for not warm enough. I showed up to holidays when I could, didn't make scenes, and brought a bottle of whatever wine looked fancy but wasn't over $18. I never needed a spotlight. I just wanted a seat at the table. The funny thing is, I had one, physically. My mom always said it, even when I couldn't make it. But the conversation would move around it like it was an empty lot. I stopped asking about people's jobs because no one asked about mine. I stopped offering stories from the field because they changed the subject. It wasn't hostile. It was tactical silence. Aubrey wasn't always the center. She used to be the kid sister who cried when I scraped my knee. I taught her how to tie a proper knot, check for tire pressure, and spot a lie in someone's voice. She turned that last one into a career. The shift happened sometime after college. She took a summer internship in DC and started interning for a defense communications outfit called Kingswell Strategies. The next thing I knew, she had a seat at briefings. I couldn't even sit in uniform. Her job was crafting narratives. Not lying, technically, just shaping. No one called when I was made captain. When I got promoted to lieutenant colonel after an op in Mali, Dad sent a thumbs-up emoji. But when Aubrey got quoted in Defense Weekly for redefining female leadership optics, my mom printed it and taped it to the fridge. I'm not making that up. I once asked my dad about it. "You're both impressive in different ways," he said, which sounded much like, "She's more presentable." I wasn't jealous. I didn't want her spotlight. I just wanted my record to matter. For someone to say, "Hey, we saw what you did." We know what it cost. But in my family, visibility wasn't earned. It was curated. I kept a mental list of every mission they ignored. I kept it like some people keep baseball cards, not for value, just to prove they existed. When I passed the selection course for Forward Terrain Ops, one of the hardest damn pipelines outside of Delta, my uncle congratulated me by asking if I'd thought about getting into Homeland Security, where there's more upward mobility. I nodded, said thanks. Then I excused myself to the back porch and threw up behind a potted plant. I last had dinner with the whole family 3 years ago. Thanksgiving. Aubrey brought a colleague from Kingswell, some guy named Trevor, who quoted Reagan while carving turkey. Halfway through the meal, my mother said, "It's so nice to have someone here who understands both sides of the mission." I was the only person in the room who'd been shot at. And I'm pretty sure she meant Trevor. After dessert, I left early. No one noticed. Again. The night after the beach house, I slept on top of the covers with one boot still on. I woke up with a cramp, a dry mouth, and the urge to punch a hole in the wall. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept things I didn't want to deal with. Inside, an unopened letter from the Joint Command Advisory Board dated 4 months back. A folder labeled Retired Asset Protocol, and a birthday card from Aubrey that said, "You're one tough cookie," next to a cartoon cookie-wearing aviators. I stared at that card longer than I should have. Then I folded it shut and threw it into the trash without ceremony. I made instant coffee that tasted like rust and habit. I sat down at the table I'd built myself from scrap wood, borrowed patience, and opened my laptop. Accessing the internal archive wasn't illegal. Not technically. I still had level 4 clearance from my last assignment. The system just hadn't purged it yet. Typical government. The interface blinked once, then loaded as if nothing had changed, like I still belonged. My finger hovered over the search bar like it was wired to something live. I typed slowly, Operation Bayswater, then Op BW7E, then just Trellis, Mason Trellis. The screen blinked once, no results, no file, no access denied. Just blank, like the name had never existed. I clicked through archived briefings, field notes, and comms logs. A few files opened, but they read like summaries from someone who'd never stepped outside a fob. Stripped of coordinates. No casualty report. No unit leader was assigned. There was a spot where my team should have been. A tactical ghost print. I shut the laptop lid shut and grabbed my phone before I could overthink it. I called my mother. She picked up after 2 rings, voice bright like she'd been waiting for someone else. "Hello? It's me." A beat. Then, "Julia. Well, how are you?" "I'm fine." Long silence. "I just saw the photos from Aubrey's birthday," I said. "Looked like a lot of work went into it." "Oh yes, it was lovely. The chef made duck confit. Can you believe?" "I wasn't invited." Well, it wasn't really a formal thing. There were security guards with a guest list. Another pause. This one is longer. I didn't make the list, she said. Aubrey handled it all. You know how she is with planning. She's very good at controlling what people see. Julia, my mother said sharply, this isn't fair. I waited. You have a tendency to make things feel heavy. She rewrote the story of a mission I bled for. It's not about that anymore, she said, suddenly tired. It's her moment now. Before I could answer, another voice came on the line. Dad. What are you calling about? Checking if I'm still part of the family, he exhaled through his nose. I could picture how his jaw would set, how it did every time I asked a question he didn't want to answer. No one erased you. Except the part where I don't exist. He didn't reply. I went for it anyway. You ever read the casualty report from Baywater? Silence. Did you even know Trellis didn't make it? More silence. Julia, Dad said finally, there are things that happen in the chain of command that we can't always correct. You know that. I'm not talking about correcting. I'm talking about erasure. You're too close to it right now, he said. You need distance. What I need, I said, is to know why you both looked right at me through that gate and did nothing. You could have called. I'm calling now, he sighed again. Maybe this kind of conflict is exactly why your sister didn't think it'd be a good idea. That one landed. Not because it hurt, because it was so familiar. I'd been too much of something my whole life. Too quiet, too serious, too confrontational, too military. Aubrey, on the other hand, was digestible. Good posture, good lighting, good sound bites. Mom came back on. I hope you're not going to cause problems, Julia. I'm not, I never do, she hesitated. Are you okay? No, but I didn't say it out loud. I hung up, not angrily, just off. It was the kind of conversation that didn't end. It just dies in the air and takes something with it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a spot on the wall. Same spot where a family photo used to hang, back when I thought it mattered. The empty chair across from me wasn't metaphorical. It was just a chair, but it felt like a report, like proof that I wasn't crazy. Maybe I'd spent too many years thinking they didn't know how to show love. Turns out they knew precisely how. They just gave it to someone else. I pushed the chair back like it had said something insulting and went straight for the file drawer. Middle one, marked Ops/Archive, non-destructive. That meant nobody liked to talk about old missions, but didn't have the guts to delete them. I pulled out the folder labeled BW-7E, slid it onto the table, and flipped it open. 3 pages, total. One was the mission summary. The other 2 were chain of command sign-offs that looked like they'd been scanned on a fax machine from 1999. No mention of unit designation, no names, no timeline. I opened my laptop again and logged into Cascade Media, the military's internal newswire. Search bar, top right. I typed Operation Basewater. Articles popped up. None was written by anyone who'd ever worn boots in sand. They said, the success of Operation Baywater is attributed to strategic preemptive communications, coordinated by Defense Media Liaison Teams. Defense Media Liaison Teams. That meant PR. I clicked one article dated 4 weeks after the op. The byline was from a freelancer who'd been spoon-fed talking points. The quote at the top, "Success in modern combat isn't just about force, it's about foresight." Aubrey Rains, Strategic Communications Officer, Department of Defense. My coffee went cold without me noticing. I reread that quote 3 times. Then, I clicked over to the video transcript attached. Aubrey sat in front of a muted blue backdrop, polished, poised, hair curled, makeup barely there but flawless. Her voice was calm, steady, and confident. We anticipated destabilizing elements along the corridor in Zone 7E, she said, as she'd ever been within 100 miles of that zone. So we adjusted our communication strategy to preempt reactionary aggression. Messaging matters. That's how we keep our people safe. She smiled. A pause for effect. The kind they teach you in media training. Then she folded her hands neatly on the desk, like she'd solved a hostage crisis using vocabulary. No mention of the convoy ambush. No mention of the IED that took out our lead vehicle. No mention of the 15-hour standoff. No mention of Trellis. But sure, messaging matters. I looked through the comments under the article. Words like brilliant, powerful, and female leadership in action. One guy posted a gif of someone saluting with a caption, "This is what real command looks like." I kept scrolling. One article stood out. It was a breakdown piece in Millwatch Weekly, titled, "How the DoD Flipped the Script on Baywater." It broke down how the department had taken a near-catastrophic operational entanglement and turned it into a success story in narrative resilience. The middle section discussed how the field team's actions were recontextualized to fit a larger messaging objective. One line stopped me cold. The strategic pivot, led by Rains, involved a careful restructuring of data reporting, allowing the event to be interpreted not as a misstep, but as a communicative victory. Restructuring of data reporting. That's the cleanest way to say we rewrote reality I'd ever seen. I pulled up the internal clearance chain. My level 4 didn't give me access to the raw comms archive anymore, but it still let me view edit histories on file entries. That's all I needed. The mission summary for BW-7E has been modified 3 times. Lieutenant Gregson Himes, our field liaison, submitted the first draft. The second version, sanitized, was approved by Captain Rowe from Command Intel. Final version? Authored by A. Rains, Strategic Media Review. There it was. Her initials are in the metadata. She didn't just talk about the operation, she owned it. Do you know what that feels like? It's not betrayal, it's theft. Committed with a lanyard and a password. It's the kind of theft that gets you promotions. I clicked over to the Defense Honors Board. There's a form you fill out to nominate team members for recognition. I checked the recipient list for Baywater. 2 names. Aubrey Rains, Civilian Commendation for Excellence. Rowe, Captain Malcolm, Tactical Support, Meritorious Service. No mention of the 5 people who bled in the sand. The article's header photo was a composite shot of Aubrey standing behind a podium, the American flag perfectly blurred in the background. Caption read, "Leading from the front where it counts most. No flak vest, no blood, no dirt, just teeth, blazer, and lighting." I closed the laptop slowly, then opened it again, this time with both hands as it might fight back. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw anything. I just needed to find out what else she buried. I pulled the external drive from the drawer and plugged it in like I was loading a weapon. It whirred to life with that familiar mechanical groan. This one wasn't a military issue, just a regular black drive from a tech store in Denton, wrapped in rubber casing and paranoia. I'd backed up every after-action report I was part of, partly for habit, partly because I stopped trusting the system a few years back. I opened the folder marked Casualty Logs, Active Zones, sorted by date, and scrolled to the folder for Ethiopia. The mission's official name had been Baywater 7 Echo, but we called it Half Dead Tuesday. Inside the folder, 2 full sit reps, 1 initial roster, and 1 casualty notification draft. I opened the roster, 7 names. Mine was first, and Trellis was third. He was private and new to the unit. Quiet kid, Midwest accent. Wrote poetry in his notebook and never cursed. Said, "Sir, too much." He was the first one hit when the truck went up. I didn't even have time to scream. 1 second, he was adjusting his belt. The next, the windshield was gone and the air smelled like metal and bleach. I kept going. We dragged the wounded out. Trellis was still breathing when we got him behind cover. I held pressure on his side until my hand went numb. He asked if we were going to make it. I said yes. That was the last thing he heard before his eyes went soft. After the evac, I filled out the death log myself. There was no officer around who knew him. I wrote it as cleanly as I could. Immediate fatal trauma sustained during ambush event. Time of death, 1642 local. I added, acted with composure under fire, even though he was terrified. That's what people forget. Bravery doesn't mean not being scared. It means not running even when you are. I saved it that night. No edits. I uploaded it to command, as required by the protocol. Now I looked for the official file online. I searched for his name, private. Mason Trellis. Nothing. No KIA report. No burial notice. No service acknowledgement. Not even a condolence memo. I tried the military-wide casualty database through HonorStat, the portal used for families and VA tracking. It was supposed to be airtight. If someone died under the flag, they ended up there. Except Trellis didn't. I ran a secondary search. Still nothing. No social, no obituary. As far as the system was concerned, he had never deployed. He didn't even exist in the registry of active personnel. That wasn't a glitch. That was deliberate. Someone had deleted him. I stared at the screen for so long that the cursor started to pulse with my breathing. I opened the draft notification I wrote back then, what was supposed to be sent to the next of kin. It was still in my drive, still unsent. The address for his parents was there, along with the phone number. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovered over the number. But what was I supposed to say? Hi, I know it's been over a year since your son died in uniform, and no one told you, but I just realized they erased him to make a PR package cleaner. I set the phone down and wrote an email instead. Short. Director. No details. This message asks if they have ever received an official notification about Mason. I hit send, then leaned back in the chair, wondering if I'd opened a box I couldn't close. The next hour, I read back through Trellis's entry logs. I'd saved copies of those, too. He wrote in bullet points, like his brain was half memo, half diary. 10:03 a.m. Burned eggs, again. Need a better protein plan. 11:40 a.m., Julia said. Nice work after recon sim. Didn't mess it up. 1:12 p.m. Not scared, just ready, I think. Also scared. The last one killed me. This will sound dumb, but if something happens, I hope someone says I did okay. That's all. Just okay would be good. I printed that line and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Then I opened the official commendations directory again, where Aubrey had a whole subsection of articles tagged under her name. Trellis didn't have a page. He didn't even have a grave listed. No flag. No folded triangle. No photo in a slide deck at a memorial. Just gone. And maybe the part that made me want to punch a hole through something wasn't just that he was deleted, but that his deletion was helpful to someone. Easier to sell a victory when there are no body bags in the frame. Easier to talk about narrative cohesion when you don't have a 19-year-old with a poetry notebook bleeding out in the dirt. I stared at that folder for a long time. Then I did what I hadn't done in a year. I put on my uniform, not for pride, not for symbolism, for memory, for witness, for the one they buried by erasing. The collar felt tighter than I remembered, as if the fabric knew I no longer belonged in silence. I adjusted it once, then logged into the backup access portal through the military intranet node, which was still bouncing off a dormant signal in Fairhaven. Most people didn't know that old bases had left their access points long after the people were gone. I did. I'd helped set some of them up. The firewall greeted me like an old enemy, recognizing me but not welcoming me. I ran my credentials. My level 4 clearance pinged twice. Then the system kicked out a soft chime. Clearance verified. Session duration, 25 minutes. 25 minutes wasn't much, but it was enough. I navigated to the internal admin relay, where mission logs were housed before being handed over to command comms. They lived in a quiet corner of the architecture called Vault Echo, built for raw field intelligence, untouched by PR scrubbers. I typed BW-7E/unfiltered. The screen blinked, then loaded 5 files I hadn't seen since the night of the operation. Audio, comms log, GPS pathing, drone feed. One file is labeled simply aftermath.mp4. I skipped the drone feed. I didn't need to see the dust cloud again. The comms log was worse. Voices clipped and frantic, overlapping and broken. Trellis's breathing, my own. A scream I hadn't realized I made until years later when it showed up in nightmares. Then I clicked on the aftermath file. It opened on my team crouched under an overturned truck, me wrapping a torn-up leg with gauze I stole from my kit. Someone was crying. Trellis was already still. I scrubbed forward to the part where the command finally broke radio silence. You could hear it clear as day. Unit Bravo, do not advance. Hold position until we confirm narrative asset is secured. Narrative asset, I rewound. Played it again. Narrative asset is secured. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I remember thinking maybe it was about a diplomat or a foreign contact, but it wasn't. They weren't talking about an asset. They were talking about the story. The story needed to be safe, not the people. I minimized the video and entered internal comms, searching for NA-7E, shorthand for Narrative Alignment Zone 7 Echo. It wasn't a public tag, but I knew how the comms team labeled their internal review threads. It brought up messages between two mid-level analysts from InfoCorps Strategic Comms Division, the outsourced media branch that supported PR for forward operations. The thread subject line, adjusting operational framing, BW-7E. The earliest message read, "Tactical's too dirty. Footage doesn't work. Push to reframe under strategic foresight umbrella." Rains has it, followed by, "Casualty confirmation still unverified. Easier to exclude than to explain." And then, "We scrub now, or we're on the wrong side of optics by Monday." Upload sanitized edit plus shift primary voice to civilian lead. Civilian lead. Aubrey. It clicked. They weren't just telling a cleaner story. They were burying the real one. And Aubrey wasn't just part of it. She was the signature at the bottom. I pulled open the metadata on the adjusted mission log. The document properties showed the user's name who made the last approved edit. Rains. A. Authorization. CIVDOD/PR/Delta clearance timestamp. 3:27 EST. 1 day after the mission close. That was it. Final version. Submitted by my sister at 3:27 a.m. while I was still covered in someone else's blood and waiting for evac. I sat there staring at the screen. There's a point where disbelief tips into understanding, where shock calcifies into purpose. I'd been erased, and so had Trellis and maybe the rest of the team. Not because we failed, not because we were unremarkable, but because someone needed the win more than they needed the truth. I checked the clock. 17 minutes left in my session. I copied the files to the encrypted folder on my drive and logged out clean. No trace. Then I shut the laptop like I'd just closed a casket. I stood up too fast, and my knee cracked like it had something innovative to say. I grabbed the hard drive, wrapped it in the old canvas pouch I used for field radios, and tossed it in my bag like I was heading into a war zone instead of a coffee shop in downtown Fairhaven. Civilian clothes, baseball cap, nondescript hoodie, a standard uniform for someone trying to disappear in plain sight. The coffee shop was half empty. A couple of college kids with headphones, one guy in a suit talking too loud about quarterly projections, and an older man reading a newspaper like the internet never happened. Perfect. I picked corner seat, back to the wall, opened the laptop again. No military networks this time. I was tapping into Wavemark Archive, a civilian leak repository disguised as a university research server. Most people use it to create boring, bureaucratic corruption stories. I had other plans. I started with the internal email export from the InfoCorps archive. Dozens of messages, mostly boring, subject lines like asset summary alignment and crisis simulation briefing sync. But then I hit one thread tagged urgent reframe BW-7E, sent from an analyst named Preston Whitmer to Aubrey directly. The body read, "Initial footage plus ground comms don't match intended outcome. Full tactical debrief includes unscripted commentary, casualty, blood loss, general chaos, not viable. Request permission to excise visual audio and align with comms message. Success via comms forecast, not battlefield response. Attached was a zip file labeled Baywater Raw Cap Do Not Use. It had the original helmet cam footage. I downloaded it. I don't know if you've ever watched yourself almost die from a camera on your own body, but it's not cinematic. There's no score, no hero moment. Just shaky breathing, shouting, the slight background noise of boots scraping rock and pain that doesn't always make a sound. And then I heard it, clear, distinct. My voice calling for medevac while holding Trellis's wrist. He's not gone. I've still got pulse. I need 2 hands on this now. Now. And then, you record this, and you better not cut it. I said that into the cam. Looking straight at the lens, I didn't even remember saying it until now. They cut it anyway. I minimized the video and opened another file, a media draft. Title, Operation Baywater. Preventing Collapse Through Strategic Communication. Author, A. Rains. It was written like a post-grad thesis pretending to be a military win. Terms like preemptive perception pivot, narrative insulation, and psychogeographic framing. It read like the kind of thing someone says when they've never seen blood but want to sell you a story about honor. There was a footnote. Original field footage may exist but is not representative of official positioning. Use with extreme caution. Translation. Destroy if it leaks. I went back to the email thread. One last message jumped out. Subject, Final Lock, Aubrey approved version. From Preston Whitmer. To Internal PR DoD Team, Kingswell Strategy Date. 3:32 EST. Per Aubrey's notes, final version uploaded with all tactical anomalies removed. Name of field leader, Lieutenant J. Rains, removed at her request to avoid perceived nepotism risk. Confirmed alternate phrasing, communications-led success. We're greenlit. That was it. Not only had she rewritten the story, she made sure I was invisible so no one could accuse her of helping me. I wasn't scrubbed to protect her career. I was scrubbed so I wouldn't be seen as a liability to her brand. That hit harder than the footage. She could have said, "Hey, this was my sister's op." Could have said, "She led the team." Could have said anything, but she said nothing. I was radioactive to the narrative, so she cut the wire before I could spark. I closed the email, leaned back in the chair, and let the ceiling fan hum like background noise to the realization that someone you grew up protecting would throw you under the bus if it meant better optics in a press packet. I copied the helmet cam video, the scrubbed emails, and the draft report into a new folder called Unsanctioned Verified. Then, I encrypted it twice and loaded it onto a secure thumb drive I kept in the lining of my shoe. Because the one thing the military teaches you better than any civilian agency, don't trust the people writing the story. Trust the ones who bled in it. I tightened the laces on my boot like I was getting ready for a conversation I didn't plan to walk away from. The drive to Fairhaven felt shorter than I remembered. Maybe because I'd spent the last few days doing nothing but chasing ghosts. This time, at least, I was headed towards someone still alive. Major Irene Locke hadn't been my commanding officer, but she'd been damn close. Back when I was still green and too stubborn to know when to shut up, she was the one who taught me how to argue without getting court-martialed. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Last I heard, she ran a small gunsmith shop off Highway 12 and mostly kept to herself. The shop didn't have a sign. A rusted bell over the door and a laminated notice read, "Yes, I'm open. No, I don't do background checks. Kidding, sort of." Locke looked precisely the same. Same buzzed hair, same denim vest, with a patch that said "Unapologetic" in red block letters. She was cleaning a scope when I walked in. She didn't say hello, just looked up and said, "Well, damn, the dead do walk. I need 15 minutes. You've got 5. But if you make it interesting, I'll pretend it's 6. I handed her the drive. "I need your eyes on something." She plugged it into her terminal without asking questions. Clicked through files like she'd done this 1,000 times. Which, knowing her, she had. Her face didn't move. No flinch, no wince. She always carried that same low-simmer calm in briefing rooms, which made people nervous without knowing why. When the last file finished, she unplugged the drive, handed it back, and walked over to a small fridge in the corner, pulled out 2 bottles of root beer, and slid one to me across the workbench. "You still don't drink?" she asked. "I still don't apologize." "Good. Because this isn't the kind of thing you walk away from." "I'm not trying to walk away." She took a sip, then set the bottle down hard enough to make a sound. "You know how many of these I've seen?" she said. "Where someone rewrites a loss into a goddamn marketing win." I didn't answer. She went on. "The difference is, usually the people they scrub don't know how to fight back. You've got enough receipts to bury 3 careers. I don't want careers. I want the record straight." "That's your first mistake," she said, thinking the truth is something people want. It isn't. They want symmetry. They want stories that close neatly. You're a loose end. I nodded. I knew that already. She leaned on the bench and looked straight at me. "I've seen your sister talk on TV. She's clean, polished, marketable, and full of shit. She deleted a soldier." "Yeah, she did, and the system let her." There was something in how she said it, like she'd seen more than just mine. "You think going public works?" I asked. She shook her head. "I think going loud makes them panic. And when people panic, they mess up. And when they mess up, you get leverage. So what? I drop the files anonymously. Leak them? Number, you don't leak. You present, on your terms, on your platform. You don't hide behind sources close to the matter. You stand in front of it." "I don't want to make it about me," she grinned. "It already is. You just haven't taken control of it yet." I didn't finish the root beer. I stood up, drive in hand. Locke didn't say goodbye, just nodded once. A clearance, a green light. On the drive back, I didn't play music. Just thought about the difference between silence and peace, and how I'd never had either. I opened a clean document, cracked my knuckles, and started typing like I was filing a report no one could bury this time. There was no intro, no fluff, just names, dates, comm logs, edits, omissions, and the whole chain of sanitized decisions that led to a 19-year-old death being paved over by a press packet. It was the kind of thing they'd call disruptive in a newsroom and insubordinate in uniform. I finished the draft at 3:16 a.m. 3 attachments. 1. The helmet cam footage. 2. The original casualty log. 3. The internal email chain. I sent it to a secure inbox that belonged to an independent journalist named Jules Everhart, ex-military, dishonorably discharged for breach of decorum, which meant told too much truth in front of the wrong colonel. I'd never met her, but I trusted her more than anyone who smiled in a suit. Then I drafted a second message. This went directly to the Office of Strategic Communications, Department of Defense. Subject: correction required. Operation Baywater narrative. Formal discrepancy. Notification body. Your record is incomplete. The attached files represent verifiable first-person data. I recommend amending your public materials and issuing formal acknowledgement to private. Mason Trellis. You can ignore this, but I'm done being quiet. Lieutenant Column Julia Rains. Re-T. I hit send, shut the laptop, and grabbed my jacket. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Aubrey was headlining it, launching a new Veteran Forward initiative, backed by the same defense firm that had whitewashed our mission. It was being held at the Pendleton Civic Center, less than an hour from where I lived. Public access, RSVP, only for seating, but open to walk-ins. I wore my uniform. Not for show. For ID, they'd have to let me go through it. The room was brighter than hell. Rows of chairs, LED panels, cameras on tripods, staffers with coffee and badges that said press liaison, like that meant anything. I stood in the back, didn't speak, just watched. Aubrey took the podium right on schedule. Navy blue dress, minimal jewelry, hair back. She looked like everything they wanted me to be when I joined the officer corps. Polished, presentable, composed. "Good afternoon," she said. Today we move forward in support of those who served, those who sacrificed, and those whose voices deserve more than memory. They deserve action. She paused for applause. It came warm and scripted. She clicked a remote, and a giant screen behind her lit up with the words, "Veteran Forward, redefining service for the next generation." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just pulled out my phone and uploaded the video to 3 platforms, tagging the DoD, the press outlet, and the Office of Public Oversight. I watched her face as her aide leaned in, whispering something into her ear. She blinked. Once, twice. Then she glanced toward the back of the room. Right at me. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I didn't flinch. She looked back to the audience, cleared her throat, and continued. But I saw it. In the hesitation. In the flicker of her eye. At that moment, her voice caught before her following sentence. The story had slipped out of her hands. They could spin all they wanted. Put her on magazine covers. Give her keynote slots. Let her talk about optics and leadership pathways. But I had the one thing they couldn't edit out. Proof and a pulse. No one bled in her briefings, but I remembered the smell, the sound, the weight of a 19-year-old kid dying in my arms while command radioed about narrative assets. I turned and walked out before the applause came back, not out of anger, out of satisfaction. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. It was inconvenient. I tossed the badge on the floorboard of my car like it still had her fingerprints on it. The engine idled for a few minutes while I was not driving, just thinking. Not rage thinking, not plotting. Just that strange stillness that comes after something breaks clean. Then the emails started. First came an automated confirmation from the Office of Military Records. Subject: Acknowledgement of submission. Supplement to Operation BW-7E. Nobody, just the receipt. But it meant the system had accepted the packet. Next came an alert from HonorStat. I clicked it. Status change. Private. Mason Trellis. Reinstated to active duty KIA roster. Effective immediately, the service record has been restored to the official log. Next of kin to be notified. Note: your submission is being reviewed for inclusion in the posthumous commendation review. I read that twice. No thank you, no apology. Just a bureaucratic update that made him real again. I pulled over and stared at my phone, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Because I knew how this worked. Silent corrections. No headlines. No public admission. That's how the system protects itself. It gives you what you deserve quietly enough that no one else sees it happen. But this wasn't for anyone else. It was for Trellis. For the version of him that didn't make it to a memorial. For the kid who thought just okay would be enough. And for me. Because I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed the record to stop lying. I drove back to my apartment. Not fast. It's not like a movie. Just a quiet, steady drive, windows down, no music. When I got home, there was a letter under my door. Handwritten, no envelope. From the Office of Strategic Communications. Not a lawsuit, not a threat. Just a single sheet of paper. Lieutenant Colum Rains, your concerns have been noted. We are initiating an internal review of BW-7E and the associated communication strategy. You will not be contacted further. DoD Comms Integrity Unit. Translation: you did enough damage to make us fix it, but not enough to make us say your name. I folded it once and slid it into a drawer with the rest of the noise. Then I rechecked the public casualty tracker. Trellis's name was there now. No bio, no photo, but a name, rank, unit, date, location. I stared at it until the screen dimmed and logged me out. No press release, no Twitter trend, no photo op. Just a correction in silence, which, in their world, was a scream. I changed into a clean shirt, laced my boots tight, and drove to the one building where names still had weight. The Garrison Hall of Commendation wasn't designed to impress. It looked like a DMV from the outside. Concrete, flat roof, faded flag out front. But inside, it had one job: hold names, walls lined with plaques. Each has the same layout: name, rank, unit, and operation. No photos, no eulogies, just the facts, engraved into polished steel that didn't flinch. I'd only been here once before. Years ago, after a buddy from Fort Riley didn't come home, I didn't think I'd ever return. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She pointed me toward the east wing and said, "They updated the boards last night. That was all I needed." I walked past names I didn't know, and some I did. Some I remembered from chow lines and briefing rooms. Some I only remembered after I read them out loud in my head. Then I found it: Trellis, Mason D. Private. 4th Recon Unit, Operation BW-7E. That was it. No story, no spin, no branding, but it was real. Cold, stainless truth. Installed in a hallway that didn't care who you were on television. I stood there with my hands in my pockets. No salute, no prayer. Just a breath held a little longer than usual. Maybe I could let go of the weight if I timed the exhale right. A janitor passed behind me, pushing a cart with a squeaky wheel. He nodded once. I nodded back. That was the entire ceremony. No speeches, no podium. It was enough. I walked the rest of the wing slowly, letting my boots echo. I counted 23 names from missions I recognized. 4 I hadn't heard mentioned in years. It made me think, how many more were like Trellis? How many were stripped from the record because they didn't fit the headline? They call it classified or redacted or non-essential. But really, it's convenient. Convenience kills memory. When I reached the exit, I signed the visitor log. Name, time in, time out. There was a space for remarks. I didn't leave one. The whole point was that the name was already there. Finally, permanently. On my way out, I passed a group of ROTC kids getting a tour. One of them was complaining about the lack of vending machines. Another said something about just wanting to serve and make his mom proud. I didn't say anything, just kept walking. Outside, the wind picked up a little, not dramatic. Just enough to make the flag snap once, like it had a point to make. I got in my car and sat briefly with the engine off, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same eyes, the same scar above the brow, same old face that had watched good people vanish into paperwork. But this time, someone came back. And this time, my silence was the loudest thing in the room. I started the car, turned the radio off mid-sentence, and headed toward the last place I wanted to be seen. The Department of Veterans Affairs Conference Center in Arlington looked like a converted hotel ballroom, pretending to be a government space. Nobody read beige walls, generic carpeting, folding chairs lined with paper programs. But the lighting was good, and the photographers knew their angles. I hadn't RSP'd. Didn't have to. My name had quietly re-entered the circulation last week after the files dropped. They didn't call it an apology, but the invite formally acknowledged field leadership contributing to the foundational success of Operation BW-7E. Foundational success. They poured it under someone else's stage as if we were just concrete. Still, I went. Because this was the one time they couldn't shut the door. I showed up 10 minutes before it started. No escort, no entourage. Just me, the same boots, and a flash drive in my pocket still held the original comms file. Not because I needed to show it, but because I needed to know it existed. Inside, the air felt preconditioned for approval. Politicians are glad-handing in the corners. PR staff managing smiles like battlefield logistics. A few faces turned toward me. Some recognized the uniform. Fewer recognized the person. That was fine. The program had 15 names listed for verbal recognition. I wasn't one of them. Didn't matter. They got to the part where they called up civilian contributors to narrative leadership. Aubrey walked out in a navy blue pantsuit this time. Sleek, restrained, calculated. She smiled like she'd just come back from solving diplomacy somewhere sandy. She gave a small speech about communication being the heart of mission clarity. No mention of bodies, no mention of silence, And then they opened the floor to any attending honorees who wished to provide brief remarks. They didn't expect anyone to take them up on it. I stood, not fast, not defiant, just enough to be noticed. The organizer tried to say something. I think it was, "We're short on time." But someone in the audience clapped once, a single clap. And that was all it took. The silence let me pass. I didn't go to the podium. I stopped 5 feet from it and turned to face the room. No notes, no script. "I won't be long." They always say that, but I meant it. "My name is Julia Rains. I served as field commander during Operation BW-7E. Some of you didn't know that until this week. That's fine. Pause. 1 second. Breathe. A member of my team died in that operation. His name was Mason Trellis. He was 19. He did everything right. He died scared. And then he was forgotten. Deliberately. No reaction, no gasps. Just the kind of stillness that makes people sweat in expensive clothes. I'm not here to shame anybody. I'm here to say his name. Out loud. Where it can't be deleted again. I look straight ahead. Right past the camera lenses. Past the lights. Right at Aubrey. She didn't blink. I didn't flinch. He wasn't a narrative asset. He was a soldier. And the only reason his name is on the wall now is because someone made too much noise to ignore. Silence again. Then I stepped back. Didn't wait for applause. Didn't look around. I walked right past the podium. Past the rows of practiced smiles and staged patriotism. Past the panelists with their microphones and credentials. Back into the aisle. And out. One photographer tried to follow. I didn't slow down. A kind of dignity comes from knowing you've said exactly enough. No more, no less, not for headlines, not for the image. Just enough for truth. On my way out, I tossed the lanyard badge into the trash and didn't break stride or look back. The air was thick with heat when I got to the parking lot. It was one of those heavy, humid afternoons that pressed against your skin like a question you weren't ready to answer. I spotted her before she spoke. Aubrey was leaning against a black SUV parked by the curb. Arms folded, blazer still flawless, heels digging slightly into the asphalt. The aide glued to her earlier stood several feet away, pretending to scroll through a phone. "You made your point," she said. I didn't stop walking. She followed, matching my pace in heels too expensive for pavement. That wasn't the time or place for theatrics. I stopped. "You think I did that for drama?" Her jaw tensed. "You ambushed a federal ceremony," I laughed once. Short, quiet, sharp. "You scrubbed a dead kid to sell a slogan." She stepped forward. "I didn't scrub him. I followed the framework." "You rewrote the framework." "No," she snapped. "I protected it." We were falling apart back then. Every story had to hold. Public trust was cracking. "So you deleted a soldier." I streamlined the message. The words landed like paperwork, cold, flat, sanitized. I took a step closer. "You weren't even there. I didn't have to be." "Then stop pretending you know what that desert felt like." She looked away for a second. Just a flick of the eyes, then back, tighter now. "Do you think any of this brings him back?" Number, but it stops him from disappearing again. A long silence passed between us. Then she said, "You could have come to me privately." I nodded. I could have, and you would have scheduled a meeting, passed it to legal, maybe offered me a quote to post on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody was watching. That's not fair. Neither was Trellis dying scared while you rewrote him into a strategic adjustment. She looked tired now, not broken. Just stripped of the polish. Her eyes darted past me, the building, and the cameras still being packed up. "I didn't know how to protect both things," she said. "What things?" "You and the story that hit soft, but not deep. Then you picked the one with better lighting." She looked down, hands now fidgeting with the edge of her blazer. I hadn't seen a nervous tick since we were kids, when she'd get caught lying and try to smooth the wrinkles out of her skirt like it would fix the moment. "I never wanted to erase you," she said quietly. "But you did. A beat." You made me invisible, and I meant it. Not just in the reports, in the dinners I missed, the birthdays I wasn't listed for. The silence wrapped around me like it was a favor. She met my eyes again with less fire and more glass. What do you want from me? I didn't answer right away. Then, nothing. Her face twitched. I just wanted you to see me. I turned to go. She didn't stop me. I walked back to the car. No chase, no drama. Just gravel crunching under boots that weren't polished and didn't need to be. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need her version of closure. I'd reclaimed my name, record, death, and silence. But most importantly, I had stood in a room where her version of the truth used to be airtight. And I tore a hole in it. They could patch it, but it would never be seamless again. And neither would she. I drove home with the windows down, nothing playing, just air. And I didn't feel erased for the first time in a long while. I wasn't back. I was never gone. I was always still alive. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be heard once, by the right ears, in the right room, without flinching. I didn't get justice in the way people expected it. No headlines, no courtrooms, no public apologies. But his name's on the wall now, and mine isn't missing from the report. That's enough. People talk about closure like it's a door you get to shut. But I've learned some doors never close. They just stop slamming. And sometimes, silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the moment they can't ignore you anymore. If this story hit somewhere quiet in you, if you've ever been erased, overlooked, or pushed aside by the people closest to you, then you get it. We tell stories like this because revenge isn't always loud, and family drama isn't always fiction. Sometimes it's real, and sometimes it's personal. So if you want more revenge stories and raw, honest family drama that doesn't pull punches, subscribe to the channel. We don't just tell stories. We return them to the people who were never supposed to be forgotten.